Welcome into another edition of the Inside Carolina podcast. I'm not 100% sure what to call this. It's not yet on the beat because we're missing John Bowman, but it is Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, and I do have beat writers Jeremiah Holloway and Adam Smith with me. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. I'll start with either one of you. Adam, since you're left on my screen, and then Jeremiah to follow up. Mack Brown had a lot to say today. I
He
thought
did.
that was one of the more informative news-making press conferences that we've had in a long time, Adam. I mean, just a laundry list of news that came out of it. You guys have nailed it on site, but, I mean, where to even start, man?
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot to cover. I felt like, sometimes when you walk out of there, I felt rushed. What is the deal with Tuesdays? Wasn't it? It was last Tuesday when the Tez Walker bombshell dropped, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah,
And,
nothing like the Friday news dump anymore. It's get it out on Tuesday.
Tuesday chaos, terrible Tuesday. But yeah, I thought that. I mean, you felt like going into today, we're scheduled to hear from Mack today, and you felt like going in that he would have something to say about Tez Walker's situation, even though it sounds like UNC continues to have no idea when they may or may not hear from the NCAA on this. So you felt like Mack would have something to say about that, and he had a lot to say about that.
I kind of like feisty Mack.
Yeah, as Jeremiah wrote, I mean, he named Charlie Baker by name and said, I'm banking on Charlie Baker, which means, Carolina Nation turns its lonely eyes to you, Charlie Baker. But yeah, I mean, he had quite a bit to say about Tez Walker. As Jeremiah and I and Ben Sherman and Evan Rogers, our new intern, had talked, we were sort of expecting him to maybe go through the scrimmage that UNC had on Saturday more than he did. I was expecting maybe for him to give a breakdown. But he didn't do that. But then he sort of made his way through the depth chart with some pleasant surprises that he's seen. So, you factor that in. You factor in some of the injury news. They got good news on Legend Cavazos and RJ Grigsby in that they're not lost for the season. Those guys having surgery or have had surgery. And, there was a lot to take in. The notepad was filling up today, I felt like.
Absolutely. Let me sort of set the stage for folks because this one, okay, so I pull up. Somebody in the chat, Larkin, you're moving in Friday as a sophomore. Well, I've been in the process of moving mine in up there, so I was a little late. So I'm driving past the baseball stadium, and I see Adam and Jeremiah and everybody else getting ushered in. And I holler and say, somebody hold the door for me. And I have to go park in Ramshead deck. And I run up the hill and walk into the practice facility, which they had left the door ajar for me. And folks, it was hot.
Yeah, it was so hot.
I walked across, down the driveway and across the turf. And Jeremiah, I was standing behind you, and I hope I wasn't stinking because I had sweat running down my legs. It was so hot today out there.
It was gross.
It was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous.
And you walk up and the dudes are running what I call suicides, back and forth, up and down, up and back, and all that stuff. It was insane. Jeremiah, your take on this Tez Walker deal? I feel like Mack and Carolina are really turning up the pressure. And like to Adam's point, he mentioned Charlie Baker by name.
He did.
It just seems like they want this resolved as soon as possible. But then again, it doesn't sound like it's going to be resolved in any sort of time frame that we can nail down.
No, there's definitely not any type of outlined, path for when this is gonna. Well, first of all, real quick, shout out to Larkin for moving in. Hope all of that went well. But yeah, no, there's definitely not a structured timeline. That's what he said last week, and that's what he said today as well. I asked him today when they actually submitted the waiver because last week they were just saying, "Oh, we just heard back a couple of weeks ago, and we're just now addressing it." And so they submitted it back in the spring. And in the research that I was doing, the NCAA doesn't consider the waivers to be priorities. They're not something or urgent, I think is what the language said. It's not something that they jump on right away to look at. So several months ago is when the waiver really went in. And so now we get this news and there's really no telling when it's going to be clarified, and it's already been 2 weeks. So that's something that UNC now, the way that they're approaching it football wise is as if Tez is going to play. Now, my personal opinion, since it is such an unknown, I'm not totally sure that that's something that's going to just, be so simple. I think really what they would have to do is kind of work by committee, because I don't think that's a player you can truly replace. You're going to have to try and use everybody, mix everybody in as much as you can. He did mention, somebody asked him, are they prepared for life without Tez Walker? A couple names he threw out there were J.J. Jones and Gavin Blackwell. I don't know if those are plug and play players necessarily. I think it's something you have to kind of mix around. So that's the football side of it. Now the decision side of it is, when I look at it, if it's true that what they're saying that he enrolled in the classes on the 9th and the rule was changed on the 11th, which rule was changed on the 11th. I'm just kind of curious as to why there's not a grandfather clause, where he operated under rules that were, the rules, the guidelines at that time, and they did switch. So if he did enroll in classes on January 9th, that's the part that I personally find interesting. But man, I mean, just moving forward, and Adam and Tom, you guys have been around, longer than I have. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys have kind of seen before, just with the specifics of this situation. I know Mack was talking last week that he had a player before, he had a waiver denied initially, or he had eligibility deferred initially because of a test score, and then they went through the paperwork and that got resolved. So we'll see if this gets resolved. I think it's really just a product, real quick. I just think it's a product of, the athletics during COVID, because a lot of things, the NCAA, I think, was a little bit more lenient with some of that stuff when COVID was still considered a global pandemic. I think they're trying to move away from that. And I don't know, maybe them not adding the grandfather clause, maybe that's their way of saying, hey, we're going to, kind of try to limit the, amount of transfers we can have. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's their strategy. But yeah, it's certainly a unique situation, so close to the start of the season as well. Not something UNC ever thought they were going to, need to consider. They're ranked 21 in the country right now, and they've had, Tez Walker get some preseason awards. So, I mean, if it actually does come out that he's unable to play, I mean, I just think that changes a whole lot. I'll say that. It changes a whole lot.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. And as you were talking, about the NCAA, I was thinking, man, you should have been around in 2010. Because none of the slowness and the snail's pace that they work at surprises me. Nothing. And that's why, if I had to put money on it, you would hope it wouldn't happen, but I would wager it goes into the season. Now, if it doesn't, and it shouldn't, maybe, they'll prove me wrong there. But as far as, the grandfather clause, that even if we were talking, and I'm no lawyer, and we had that, we've had people smarter than me talk about it, but even if we're talking about a grandfather clause, he was in before the rule changed. He was at Carolina before the rule changed. So it's not really, he's in, and then they need to grandfather him in. I mean, the bottom line is, like Mack has said, he's done everything right. They did what they're supposed to, and now they've changed it. As far as when a decision is, that's why we haven't done a prediction podcast yet, folks, or an over-under podcast, because I can tell you it will significantly change with or without Tez Walker, regardless of what they say. Adam, from a purely football perspective, and this is much deeper than football, we've heard it. We heard Governor Cooper tell me and tell Joey that it was much more than that. And Mack and them, I'll give them credit. They full court pressed this one, more so than I've seen. But from a purely football perspective, clearly J.J. Jones, Gavin Blackwell, and the guys he's named can step up. But it's a very different type guy when you're talking about Tez Walker on the field versus no Tez Walker on the field. Or no Tez Walker on the field versus him on the field.
I mean, I think it could be, this sounds dramatic, but I think it could be the difference between being good and great, or decent and good for UNC. But Tommy, my mind started churning when you said 2010. I mean, back in the when the Butch Davis when the scandal was going on, it seems unbelievable. But you want to talk about where's Waldo? You know, because like now before games, we get up there, we got the binoculars, trying to check out who's warming up where before games. Before games, back then, you know, Dick Bedore used to come in. It was like a makeshift press conference with Dick Bedore at football stadiums across the ACC. It was unbelievable. I mean, and he would say, "Look, we don't have here are 4 guys we're not going to have today who have already played, you know, for various reasons." You know, it was crazy. I can remember, I don't know why, I always remember hearing him give us one of those at UVA one day. I think Dwight Jones went off that night, but I could have mixed up the UVAs.
He went off in one of those up there.
There was one, there's one where he had like 3 touchdowns in the first half or something.
Yep.
But anyway, when you said 2010, I was like, yeah.
I mean, it's just the NCAA. Somebody, Krebs in the chat said, this feels like it's in the doldrums of the NCAA. I don't know where it is. I ask, and I've asked more than once, who actually makes a decision? Like, what human being will make the decision? To sort of round out the Tez Walker situation, for his sake, they need to make a decision. Because he needs to be able to move on and, you know, whatever he needs to do. For North Carolina football's sake, I think it changes the game a little bit. But anybody expecting the NCAA, and I say this, and they could break it while we're talking, there's no rhyme or reason. So asking for a time frame, asking for when this is going to happen, you don't know. You would hope we'd get some sort of hint about when it's coming down, but who knows? And, it has been interesting to me, and I'm talking too much here because this is about you guys, but it's interesting to me how hard Mack has gone after this one and sort of battled for his player.
That's what he's doing. And you've said full court press, and that's what they did. They're trying to, we talked about it last week, I think it was, or you guys talked about it right after Mack got done, that they're trying to put the pressure on them, the court of public opinion, and they're trying to keep it on them. You know, they're trying to get some resolution, and they're doing it through public channels right now. You know, I'm not sure how many back channels they got. And by the way, Tommy, shout out to you, as you mentioned, on the Roy Cooper get. My word. I mean, it's like got the dang governor on with you and Joey Powell. So
so Joey made that happen, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, there's no way this guy's not going to show up. We're going to be sitting here waiting, you know, there's storms out there. There's going to be some state of emergency governor. And he pops up on this screen, and I'm like, oh, shoot, that's Governor Cooper.
A little different than us.
First fan.
Yeah.
And he sort of laid out his knowledge. I mean, you know, about Walker, but also about Carolina in general and stuff. And so, I mean, Carolina's going all out, as well they should. The NCAA needs as much pressure on them as possible. I'm of the opinion, just make a decision, right? Just do something. Purgatory is never good. And right now they're in purgatory. And we talked about it, the 3 of us and with UNC folks, like at some point, Carolina's got to start preparing for South Carolina and having a game plan. And Walker changes the game plan. So how do you handle that? You can say we're going all in expecting him to play. That's one thing. But you got to have contingency. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Do you turn the corner into game week, and if they've got no resolution, do you not practice him that week? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you
scout team him?
Right. Do you then move J.J. Jones up to number 1 at that outside receiver spot? And I mean, I don't know what you do, you know, because like, so say you don't practice him on Tuesday, and you could find out on Thursday. You know, I don't know. It's going to be a whole Pandora's box situation here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, whatever you do, just real quick. I mean, whatever you do, that first week you're definitely gonna have to figure it out because you know, you can't run that whole week not knowing if he's gonna play or not. You know, and then it gets to game time and guys are, you know, you're calling different plays. I'm sure they have different packages in play, but I mean, I'm sure they've already built so much of that offense around, you know, Tez being complemented with McCollum and Pacer and those guys. So if you take that out, I feel like and again, you know, this kind of depends on the depth of their playbook, but, you know, how many plays do they have structured to where they can, you know, essentially not have Tez? And then not only that, how long can you keep that going during the game before defense kind of catches on to it? So yeah, and to both of you guys' points, they're going to have to make a decision soon for the sake of Tez and his personal just emotions, and then also for just generally speaking, getting that resolved before the season starts.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be interesting to watch. Hey, there's always something, and I've poo-pooed the way North Carolina's handled certain things in the past, specifically during that 2010 saga. Obviously, many different people there these days than were there then, but they're all in on it. And I said earlier, feisty Mack, fired up Mack, angry Mack. I kind of like it, and it's kind of interesting to see when folks defend their folks, and it's interesting. I know other people say, well, the Florida State guy is completely different, and people don't even need to compare those because he played for Maryland and then he played for Miami, and so it's not even anywhere near the same thing.
But I do think that I agree with you on that, but I do think that his situation could be wrong, but it looks like to me they just made these blanket waiver denials, the NCAA I'm saying, where if you look at it, yeah, it's apples and oranges. If you look at the different situations, I feel like, but it looks like to me they just said, you know what?
Yeah.
Here's all the guys who got denied, because that came out the same day Tez came out, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And there may be others that we just haven't heard about, but either way, somebody needs to make a decision and get that handled so there's going to be some sort of closure. And if it's a negative decision for North Carolina and for Tez Walker, it's not over. I think that's pretty clear as well. So, at any rate, it looks like you've got a South Carolina fan in the chat, Jeremiah.
Oh,
they recognize you from your past life down in Columbia. But
yeah, I did some football in Columbia too. Now, don't shortchange me now.
Jeremiah came home. I mean, he knows where he's supposed to come back, and then South Carolina's a spot to be on that. We're talking with Adam Smith and Jeremiah Holloway, sort of a mini on the beat after Mack Brown's press conference on Tuesday, August 15th. If you haven't seen the press conference, of course, Inside Carolina's got the video up. Interesting stuff. Number 2 on the list that I thought was relevant, and Adam, I'll kick it to you here as well. There was a lot of news, position-wise news, but Jason and I talked about Diego Pounds, and I said, is there a chance that Diego could play outside and slide Barnes in? And Jason said, I don't think he's there yet. He's not at that point. Well, he's working at it. It sounded like Mack said, unless y'all heard something different, I heard Diego's working at left tackle and William Barnes is working some at right guard, which is exactly what I was meaning. What did you think about that change? Because the offensive line, there's some concern there, I think.
Yeah, I think, yes. I think that, how many, they've had 11 practices. If we're reading between the lines like I think we are, I think they're concerned about the offensive line. It sounds like, now this is just me speculating, but it sounds like they haven't had the greatest training camp. Now, of course, you know how you do this. You flip that over to the other side. Maybe the defense, maybe the front seven has improved and been better. But Diego Pounds, we put together, we called it a stock watch on the depth chart today. And we got stuff like that, like insight tidbits from Mack today about guys, you might not see these guys play 50 snaps, but some guys who might get 10 or 15 snaps. And yes, Diego Pounds, we'll roll through them real quick. It was Diego Pounds. He sort of highlighted on the offensive line. He said Connor Harrell's consistency, and that guy's been inconsistent, has gotten better at quarterback. Connor Harrell has never taken a snap in a college game. He said Chris Culliver, the true freshman wideout who's just gotten there. He highlighted him. He highlighted Bo Atkinson, Thor himself, at defensive end. And that was a name that sort of jumped out. They sound like they're super high on Amari Campbell still, the true freshman linebacker. And it sounds like he's going to be first up behind Power Eccles and Cedric Gray at linebacker. And Tayon Holloway he highlighted Tayon Holloway in the secondary. Caleb Cost too a little bit at star, but Diego Pounds. Mack said Diego Pounds is working some with the blue team, which is the first team offense at left tackle. Is that an indictment of William Barnes? I'm not sure. Maybe. Or does that mean that Diego's really coming? He is a massive human being. Diego Pounds and Travion Green are huge. And these guys are the bookend tackles of the future. I mean, these guys are big, big, big dudes. So, I don't think Diego Pounds is ready to play a full game. But, that was one that, there's certain names that he brings up, that he brought up today that perk your ears up. Like Bo Atkinson, because it really sounds like Bo Atkinson's coming at defensive end. I mean, they're not replacing Des Evans at power end right now with Bo, but it sounds like he's made a case to play in games. Max said Bo is going to play.
Yep.
Probably not good for Jacoby Cowan, by the way, but he said Bo is going to play. So yeah, it sounds like Chris Culliver has popped. I'm sure he doesn't even know all the plays because he didn't even go through spring practice. And it sounds like when Cedric Gray and Power Echoes get spelled this year, when they get a breather, it's going to be Amari Campbell coming in, and they can play him at either spot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jeremiah Adams sort of listed off all those names, and a lot of them we've talked about on these shows on the boards or amongst ourselves. But what names sort of caught your ear and eye today listening to Mack talk about them? There's a lot of guys. There's going to be some significant new names that, unless you're a diehard North Carolina football fan, you're not going to recognize their names.
Yeah.
I think day one or game one against South Carolina. What caught your ear today?
Chris Culliver definitely caught my ear. The reason being is because I remember asking him about, I believe I asked him about Christian Hamilton, if I didn't ask him about just the freshman as a whole. And he was talking about the fact that Christian Hamilton did have that elevated level of familiarity with what was going on because he was there in the spring. Culliver, as we know, just arrived for, essentially for this fall camp as far as playing and participating. And he brought him up unprovoked. Like Chris Culliver came up in his opening statement, and he did say, to Adam's point, he said that he doesn't know everything. There's still some things that he's learning, but because of his speed and his size, that's somebody that they're high on right now. How much does he play? I mean, I think that's an interesting conversation. I mean, I think you could see him catching a few balls here and there. That wide receiver group is pretty deep. They do have experience there. So that's kind of the main caveat. But God forbid someone, gets hurt or, just whatever, the Tez Walker thing doesn't get resolved. I don't know. I'm sure they feel comfortable putting in a Chris Culliver for a few plays. They probably maybe even feel a little bit more comfortable with a Christian Hamilton just because of the fact that he was there in the spring. So Chris Culliver, that stood out to me because of how new he truly is. And then I want to bring up Diego Pounds again, because I know that's somebody they really want to play and want to be able to get in there. Mack said that he was running with the ones and the twos as far as his positioning or as far as his, place on the depth chart. So he's really one word that Mack brought up with Diego was consistency, that he needs to be able to kind of bring it, every practice and really show every down that he's going to be able to be a guy that can be in that, 8-man rotation, that he can really stay on the field. His teammates, when you asked about him to his teammates, they've said that he's looked better, things like that. So Diego Pounds is certainly, because of his size, that's a guy that they're really going to want to use this year. He also brought up Zach Rice and Travion Green, mostly working in that second unit. When we talked to Chip Lindsey on Friday, he was just straight up honest with us. He said the depth on the offensive line is just not there yet, as far as them wanting to get those 8 guys that they're saying. We know Corey Gaynor is going to play, the whole game. He's too experienced, and he's going to play as many snaps as they need him to play. And there's a few others. They really like Willie Lampkin, but they're going to really need to establish that depth, especially considering who they're blocking for. The fact that they're blocking for Drake May, somebody that they're expecting a lot of productivity from. And I think another thing with that, real quick, just talking about that unit as a whole, the running game is something that they're really trying to hone in on too. They're high on that running back room. They feel like they have a lot of weapons back there, but your ability to block is just that's just gonna go a long way for that entire scheme. But without getting on too much of a tangent of that, I would say Chris Culliver and Diego Pounds were certainly some names. Amari Campbell, just real quick to wrap up, Amari Campbell being that linebacker 3, that's going to be huge because if you're mostly playing Power Echols and Cedric Gray, obviously talented guys, we know that, but you don't want to have to run those guys the whole game, every game for 12 weeks. You're going to want to have somebody to have that release. So UNC should definitely feel good about the fact that they have a third. They shouldn't be satisfied. You do want that fourth. You do want to go deeper into that room. But the fact that you do have at least one guy that can kind of get on the field, that's a good sign. And so, those were certainly the names that stood out to me.
What's interesting about all of that is Mack has said in the era of the transfer portal, you have to get guys in the game and you have to play guys snaps or else they're going to go somewhere else. And when you have talent there, obviously you mentioned Amari Campbell and said in Power, that's not going to be a transfer portal issue for Cedric and Powell and in Power because they're entrenched there. But for Campbell and Sebastian Cheeks and those guys, they got to play and they're going to want to play. I mean, it's not just that position; it's the offensive end. It's across the board. One thing about the linebackers and why Amari Campbell becomes so important, and also Sebastian Cheeks and Deuce Caldwell, if it comes to that, the targeting rules sit you out in a hurry. And that's probably my least favorite rule in college football is the targeting rule. I think it ought to be a 15-yard penalty the first time. You do it again, then you need to go. But we saw Power, I guess, a couple years ago get kicked out of a game on a special teams play.
Yep. FSU, I think.
Yeah, it was just a great lick.
Yeah, he lit somebody up.
Yeah, and he's out of the game. Well, that happens, with him being a linebacker. Then North Carolina's in trouble unless Amari Campbell and those guys can step up. And so that's why it's important. Depth is crazy important on the defense for that reason, I think. Anyway, let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnyt-shirt.com right fast. We got so much more to talk about here with Adam and Jeremiah here at Inside Carolina, sort of on the beat light. But Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street, I walked by there today. First of all, I ate at Buns. Have you ever had Buns?
Yes.
Man, I'm going to have to talk about Buns at some point. That place was fabulous. But back to Johnny T-Shirt, that was some really good burgers. And I let the guy working behind the counter pick mine because I'd never been there. Anyway, Johnny T-Shirt and johnnyt-shirt.com. They got to be excited that the students and everybody are back on campus, and folks that are Inside Carolina subscribers need to get in there, purchase your stuff, and use that Inside Carolina gift or 10% off. And also you get Inside Carolina Premium too. So you get basically free swag and a ton of information at Inside Carolina, and they're alumni owned and operated. So they're just like you if you're a student. They're just like you if you're a parent of a student. They want to see Carolina do well. You want to see Carolina do well. We want to see local businesses in Chapel Hill or anywhere do well. Hit them up. National Guys Pay the Bills audio version. We'll be back Tuesday night on the Beat Light. All right, folks, we're back. I've got some questions in the chat, but I want to come in on Connor Harrell. And Adam, you mentioned him, so I'll kick it back to you. I watched Connor Harrell. He didn't look great in the open practice we saw. I think he can be really good, but his accuracy was not very good. For Mack to talk about him in a positive light and really praise him, I think that bodes well for the young man. Same situation with Drake. Drake's everything for North Carolina's offense, but something bad could happen and somebody's got to come in. A helmet could fly off if one play. Just what did you take away from hearing Mack talk about a guy like Connor? People that we really haven't heard about in camp, at this point yet. So he mentions Connor Harrell, which is a good thing for Carolina. What were you thinking?
Well, real quick, is Diego Pounds the best name on UNC's team? This is a team that has great names.
I think Legend Cavazos is pretty
Power
cool.
Echols is a great
name.
I'm
about to say Power Echols.
Power Echols is the most football name you can get.
Yeah. Diego Pounds is that's a pretty sexy name.
From what I understand, that young man is hilarious too, and just
he does seem like he has a big personality. But I was thinking that when you guys were rolling through, it's like, oh my! Just like Doc Chapman's a cool name. I mean, it's not the greatest name ever, but that's pretty. Yeah, we could probably go through here and pick out 20 great names. Diego Pounds.
Are we gonna have a depth chart, stock watch, and then a name watch?
By the way, I appreciate my guy George Jenkins in the chat. One of one of our loyal readers and listeners, my guy George Jenkins. We'll see. Looking forward to this season, Georgie. Tommy, to get back to your question, this might sound mean, but like, I just feel like they want Connor Harrell to be better than he has been. And I don't know I'm not saying Mack's like not telling us the truth, but maybe he was consistent today. Maybe he was consistent Saturday in the scrimmage in terms of Connor Harrell. But I feel like they want it. They obviously need it. Who the heck's the third team quarterback at UNC? I don't know. And, one of those days we were out there, Jefferson Boaz looked like he was the third team guy. I can't remember where Tad Hudson was that day, but I don't know what to make of it. I know that when you make a good point. I mean, it sounds silly in a way, but like if a helmet comes off, how many different times did Jacoby Criswell come in last year when Drake had tried to hurdle someone or something had happened where Drake had to go out for a snap? Jacoby Criswell came in, 3 or 4 games, 5 games, and didn't screw anything up. But I know that we know that the coaches weren't pleased with the way Connor Harrell practiced in December after Criswell got in the portal, and it was just Drake as the one guy and Connor Harrell as number 2 going into the bowl game. They thought he was up and down this spring, Connor Harrell. He didn't have a great spring game. I think was it the first practice we were out there, their opening practice? He got picked off by Don Chapman picked him off, and part of it that we saw. So I don't know. I think that yes, if he is becoming more consistent, I think that's huge because they need him to.
Yeah.
And I do think that he's an athletic dude. He won a ton in Alabama in high school. I think he was the valedictorian of his class. By all accounts, he's a great human being. But if Drake stubs his toe or needs to tie his shoe, you might want to hold your breath if you see 15 running in there this fall.
Yeah, and to your point about wanting and needing, I think they need guys to step up and be better. And somebody in the chat, Jenkins, your buddy Jenkins, mentioned Trubisky. Trubisky could roll out of bed and throw a strike for a touchdown. I mean, but that's not normal, right? That's not how it really normally works. There's no warm up throw. It's just I'm gonna go up and I'm gonna throw a strike to TJ Logan or TJ Thorpe and beat Virginia, or do the same thing in NC State. So those are the type things. And then somebody mentioned Marquise didn't practice well. Darian Durant was a notoriously poor practice player who could ball out on game day. But you got to show it for them to trust you to be able to go in there. I think it'll be interesting to see if they get Harrell in the games. They've mentioned that in the past.
Right.
I don't know. Do you take out your All-American, ACC Player of the Year, potential Heisman candidate person just to get another guy snaps? I don't know how that works, but they need to win some games. Another name that just popped up in the chat and I think is relevant we haven't mentioned yet. I think the news about George Pettaway getting moved around a little bit, Jeremiah, is a big deal. This is a guy who's got game-changing talent and skills that has not put it together until now, but they are giving him ways to display that. What do you think about the news that he's working in the slot as well as that change of pace back type guy?
Well, I think that opens up, some space in that running room. When we had Chip Lindsey on Friday, he was talking about the difficulty of trying to get all these guys the ball. You got to consider the fact that, it's just one football out there that you have to, account for all the tight ends and all the wide receivers and then turn around, give it to running back some play because you do want to establish a running game. I think Pettaway was the best choice for this, just given the kind of style of the other runners that they have. When you look at last year, Elijah Green from start to finish was probably their most productive running back, just from start of the season to end of the season. Statistically, had the most yards of all of the running backs on the roster. And then Amari and Hampton, he could get you a good game as well. Some of these other guys just kind of had some injuries, so they couldn't really establish a number one like I think they really wanted to. I think Elijah Green filled that role, but they couldn't establish it as early on as they probably wish they would have. So I think when you put Pettaway in the slot, that just opens it up for the rest of that room to kind of even out the carries a little bit, and allows Pettaway to do things that he does well. Like he does well in space, so it allows him to kind of play to his strength a little bit. It does help that wide receiver room, or it does help not the wide receiver room, but the passing game. If you're able to kind of get somebody, just another option that you can throw to. I really don't think Drake May is going to be short of options to throw to this year when you combine wide receivers, tight ends, and then you throw in Pettaway's going get some passes out of the slot. It just it just kind of opens things up for you. I'm not expecting him to necessarily get 25, 30 catches necessarily, just because they already have McCollum in the slot, so they already have a productive slot guy that they're going to be able to use. But I think that's going to allow you to space the field, just a little bit, and just get creative. I think it just allows you to have some sort of creativity, and it doesn't make the running back room as complicated to figure out. I already think that Hampton and Green are probably going to lead it off to start the season. I think those are the top two to start the season. But Chip did speak very highly about British Brooks the other day. And British Brooks, this is a guy that has a lot of experience, and he was poised to be the number one before he got hurt last year. But I do think that those two guys are probably going to start off the season. Brooks will definitely be in the mix. And then I think if you can use Pettaway in several different spots, someone in the comments said Drake will get him the ball. I certainly think that he would. Pettaway being able to kind of carve out that, role of being in the backfield and being in the slot, I think that opens up a lot for UNC's offense.
Yeah, and then you got Pettaway and you got McCollum returning kicks back there and that aspect of it. So you got to get a guy. But one thing that always, we've talked about this, and Adam, I'm going to ask you this because I don't know if I ever asked this question when you were on last year. People say, why doesn't so-and-so play? Why doesn't Zach Rice play or whatever? I'm not picking on him, but it's a name we hear all the time. The bottom line is Andre Green, we can go down the list.
Right.
It's pretty daggone clear that they're going to play who they think can help them. Pettaway is a guy that they believe they could help him, that can help them. Otherwise, he wouldn't be out there working in the slot. Your thoughts?
I just looked it up because I got curious. I should have looked it up earlier today, but we got a little busy. 5 catches for George Pettaway last year. Only 1 during ACC play. He had 1 catch through October, November, December. And that was against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. He did. I don't know what it was about the move that he made at App that day that has stuck with me. He put some move on some App dude in space and just dropped, the guy's panties dropped to the floor. It was just.
He dead-legged him, I think.
He really, it was something, it happened right in front of us, which was great. And you could just see it. And he was moving so fast and it was like, oh my God, that was, I think I looked at Ross and said group of 5 missed tackle, because you guys know how it is. Like, basically Ross would tweet any running joke I would have. So, I said that so Ross could get some Twitter engagement because he was good at that.
He needs it.
Right. But yeah, we'll see. Right. I thought that with Max saying that they're going to, maybe try him in the slot, motion him out of the backfield into the slot. Does that mean that you won't see George Pettaway as the starting running back? I think that's what that means. I asked a question like something to that effect. Does that mean he's not the lead back? I feel like I personally feel like they want Omarion Hampton to be the starter at running back. I don't know that he will be. Jeremiah was saying Chip Lindsey mentioning British Brooks. Mack talked about British today. It seems like there's no denying what kind of shape and health British Brooks came back in. I was kicking myself the other day when we talked to British Brooks, and I forgot to ask him because at some point in the spring he stopped wearing a knee brace. He may not have worn a knee brace all spring practice, and this guy tore his ACL. How many times do you see a guy tear your ACL in whatever, basketball, whatever, football, and not wear a knee brace?
I remember being out there and he didn't have it on that day. We were in Kenan Stadium, and I was like, My word.
I think you and I were standing there talking about it because it just occurred to us like, first it's like, who is that that's got all those abs? Oh, it's British Brooks, and then you're like, wait a minute, he's not wearing a knee brace. He tore his ACL 6 months ago. He is a dude. He is a grown man. But Pettaway, I mean, in a perfect world, oh my goodness, you get Pettaway in there for a couple snaps, and you get him matched up on some linebacker, and you just turn him loose. I think he has so much potential, and I know that he's a name that UNC fans have been wanting to show up, with highly recruited guy. But I just don't think he's going to be one of these 20 carry a guy, 20 carry a game guys. Maybe he will by the time he's a junior or senior, but it looks like they're just trying to get different creative ways to get him involved and keep him involved.
Yeah, indeed. They've got a lot of talent there, but the talent needs to step up. People in chat mentioned Caleb Hood. He's another guy who I think, if you had to lay out the most talented, best guy, if they were 100% healthy and 100%, on it, I'm not sure Caleb Hood wouldn't be that guy, but you got to stay healthy. But the bottom line is for the coaching staff, and this is one thing I asked Mack, but it was relative to the offensive line, is getting reps for everybody, getting enough reps for everybody to make sure that, A, the coaches know that they've, picked or selected or decided on who's going to start and who's going to play the most, and also to have the players feel like they've had a full opportunity to display their talents for the coaching staff. And I think Mack basically told me, he was like, man, we practice all the time. We're looking at this from 6:30 at night in the morning to 10:30 at night. The guys, I mean, you see them, they're getting rep after rep after rep. So the bottom line is the coaching staff's going to play who helps them the most and who can stay healthy. I think that's huge in football. What else have I missed, Jeremiah, talking about this? I think Tayon Holloway is another guy that we've talked about on these shows in the past over the summer. Credit to Jason Staples again. He talked about Holloway's ability, and here we are talking about him being the third corner. I think that's relevant. Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about the safeties, and I think the safety discussion is relevant given who's been out of fall camp. Who we missing, Jeremiah? Where do you want to go that we haven't been yet?
Well, we can go through the secondary, since you brought it up. I guess we haven't really talked about them a whole lot today. Of course, we know Huzzy's a guy that they've been high on, since spring. They continue to be high on him now. But we've had those open practices. We see him, guarding Tez Walker and then going over and guarding McCullum on some plays. And we see him being able to make those plays on the ball. But I think the 2 and 3 of Marcus Allen and Tayon Holloway, if those guys can kind of step up in the way that they're saying that they have, because one thing that Gene Chizik said that he likes about Allen and Holloway is their kind of their length. So they're bigger guys than Huzzy's. Huzzy's obviously, with as much game as he has, that's one thing people bring up. He's a little bit shorter, I guess, at that position. Those other guys kind of have the size to kind of complement that or offset that. Now, Marcus Allen is a guy who had to step up big last season. You guys obviously know more than me being around it and really seeing it, but he's a guy that kind of had to get thrown into the fire a little bit. And so then you have Tayon Hall. But from the safety position, DeAndre Boykins and Stick Lane had been out of practice since about last week. They do think they're going to, return. Mack Brown said today there's a chance that they can return for the first game. I think that's a position that they're going to have to really figure out what they're going to do, especially in practice. They talk a lot about how they're more kind of comfortable in the system that Gene Chizik is running, but I do think you still need to kind of have that depth long term, especially if you have Boykins and Lane out now. You do need guys later that when they do need to take the field for, we talked about targeting earlier. If something like that happens, you do need to be able to bring guys and feel comfortable bringing those guys in at the same time. So I think from the standpoint of the starters, I think the secondary is in a good place, but I think that's an underrated spot. I think a lot of times when Mack Brown brings up depth. He usually goes to the line. He usually goes to the defensive line and offensive line. And I'll throw a linebacker in there too. But I think that's another one, that they're going to have to really have depth. You don't want guys getting behind you, especially since this unit has several either new guys or returning players that are going to be playing much bigger roles than they've had to before. So you're going to want, especially for those first few weeks, you're going to be able to want guys that can show, hey, we're not going to let the defense get by us all the time. And that's something that you're gonna want depth at that position.
Absolutely, Adam.
I think I can answer some of these questions in the chat with what I had here to sort of expound on Jeremiah or play off of him. But yeah, I think that the continued emergence of Tayon Holloway, it sounds like if we're paying attention like we think we are, it sounds like so DeAndre Boykins is out right now. He's not practicing. Could he be back soon? Sure. As Max said, we think there's a chance we can have Boykins for the opener. If he's not ready to play against South Carolina, and by the way, he started every game at the nickel position in the secondary last year, you could see Elijah Huzzy there. You're either going to see Elijah Huzzy, who has earned a lot of praise as a cover corner. You're either going to see Elijah Huzzy there or converted running back DJ Jones. I know that Big Bodies was asking if DJ Jones might be a factor. I think you're going to see DJ Jones on special teams, but who knows? This dude might start at nickel in the season opener on defense, not offense.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So how wild would it be if DJ Jones was starting on defense after moving out of a crowded running back room where who knows is going to start? Who knows who's going to start? I mean, that's just, you can't make it up.
Right. Yeah. And as Mack has said, DJ went to them and asked them to move. Now, that's not usually how it happens, but that's what we heard. So, I mean, I think that to circle back, I think Tayon Holloway could be a huge element, especially if you have Will Hardy's banged up, Stick Lane's banged up, DeAndre Boykins is banged up. It's not season-ending stuff, but it's it's nagging enough to where they're not practicing. Mm-hmm. You could have Tayon Holloway, who, by the way, was listed at 160 pounds last year. 160. Max said he's up to 189, which sounds like he's gained dang near 30 pounds. You have Tayon Holloway and Marcus Allen. That is a lot of length, but those guys are wiry. Not sure how good of tacklers they are. I thought Marcus Allen whiffed on some tackles last year when he was playing. But I think that's sort of how this thing could shake out. I mean, Will Hardy, when he got in there, he made 13 or 14 tackles in the ACC championship game, but he still hasn't practiced this preseason.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. DJ Jones got some praise and has certainly moved up. Huzzy in the slot. We saw in what little bit of open practices we've been able to see, he can cover whoever. He can cover Tez Walker type guy on the outside that can fly. He can also cover, the scat back type guys like Nate McCullum, those type slot guys. So he is extremely valuable. And you're right. Both of you guys are right. Tayon Holloway's ability to step up to be that third corner gives them that option to sort of slide. Because I felt like, and we talked about DeAndre Boykins, he got, and this will be interesting to watch with Huzzy especially, Boykins struggled in coverage at times. He was taken advantage of. Teams were able to sort of do it. Notre Dame with the big, gigantic tight end was able to do it. They could do that to anybody. But how will Huzzy deal? How will Huzzy deal with that tight end H-back that's split out, that's so much bigger than him? That'll be interesting to watch. So they'll have, they've got some challenges there. The thing about it is on the defense is there's just much more talent, and we've talked about who left and all that. We're not going to rehash that stuff, but I think that they are more talented from a team perspective than they were last year. Somebody in the chat mentioned Murphy and Fox tandem on the defensive line propels the defense to be top 60. That's D. Carter, 199. I don't know about that, but those guys have looked better. Now, let me ask you both this, and then we can start wrapping this one up. Adam, you've got Mack talking about in the scrimmage they only allowed three explosive plays.
Yeah.
And from a defensive perspective, you're like, yeah, take it. They only gave up 3 explosive plays. You hope for 0, but 3 compared to times last year. I mean, they gave up 3 in 30 seconds at out. And I'm not really joking about that. It's almost accurate. But on the flip side of that, the offense only had 3 explosive plays.
Yes.
and so that is the conundrum, big word alert, that you have all spring. And people are asking, the offensive line's struggling. Well, does it mean the defensive line's better? Does it mean the offensive line's not good? I mean, where are we, Adam? Use your crystal ball here to help us understand where North Carolina is trending on offense and on defense when they're just going up against each other all the time.
That's just my bald head, Tommy. That's not a crystal ball. That's just a massive forehead.
I can see your brain through there thinking.
It's not a face. It's a face for typing on a keyboard. not
somebody told me I had a voice for telegraph, so I'll take a face for radio any day.
I haven't heard that one. It
really hurt me actually, because that was
I can see why. I mean, you're the IC official host of Inside Carolina.
I think it was in 2010. I was still bringing the country accent with me.
That was a lifetime ago. Someone asked. Someone asked in the chat, and by the way, Sean Crowley, appreciate you, dog. Someone asked I think someone asked, do you get a sense that the coaches think, could this be a special team? I think, what is today, August 15th? I do think they think that they can be good. I think they can be really good. Yeah, George Jenkins, of course I would have read that one, right? I think there are some question marks. I think the offensive line is a question mark. I think the secondary is a question mark. I mean, I think obviously the defense the defense needs to make some serious strides. But then again, you got Drake May. I think you have tons of playmakers at running back, receiver, and tight end. I mean, tight end, they might have the deepest tight end room they definitely have the deepest tight end room in the ACC. It might be the deepest tight end room in the country. I don't know what some of these other schools have, but they got 3 legit guys that could start. I think Mack has said it's a good looking team. It's an older team. This is they won 9 games last year and they won a division title, and they did it sometimes in spite of some things like defensively and some major areas that were concerns. So I think that they think this can be a good team. Someone asked Mack today, does beating South Carolina in the opener, do you need that momentum to have a special season? I really think they do. I think if you lose to South Carolina in the opener, it's you still got 11 more games to play. You could go 11-1 theoretically, but
2015.
You make it. Well, I'll shut up then. You're right. You're absolutely right. But I don't know. I mean, the way the schedule is set up, they could get to November and they could have a very good record by the time they get to November. Obviously, you have to win the games to get there. So I think they really like some of the pieces that they have. And I think that some of the other places are concerning. And there's time to iron that out. And there's time for guys to step up and come and emerge. But they need that. In some places, they are super deep, though, I feel like.
It's like, it's not like Madden or NCAA 14, if folks still playing that. You got you're 5 deep in the running back room. Move one of those guys to defensive line and jack those ratings up. You can't really do that. They do have the tight end room, the running back room, I think wide receiver, so much talent. Still working on progress on the offensive line for sure. I think, I don't think there's any excuses this year. To your point about, do they think they can be good? I think they can. I think they can be good. Mack has been, as Dwayne Hamlet in the chat said, cautiously optimistic sounding this year. But they have the pieces. Jeremiah, closing thoughts here, and then I'm going to run through sort of hot take the couple questions I've starred here. But what are your closing thoughts on today? A really informative press conference, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, as we said at the start of the show, there was a lot to go over, with, of course, the scrimmage and, of course, the news about Tez Walker. But I think my overall thoughts is this: this is a team that they have a lot of high hopes. They've had a lot of high hopes going into the year, but I think as we're getting closer to the season, you're just really, I guess, kind of breaking down, by position and by things we see. What is a realistic expectation for UNC? Like, what is, you know, like if I had to give a win total before the season started, before the Tez Walker stuff kind of came down, my max was probably 8 wins. I thought that was probably realistic just based on what the team had and the schedule, because I think there are a few games that could go either way. There are a few games that I think probably will be losses. They're gonna have to show me that they can beat Clemson. I'm not there yet. And the South Carolina, I think that's a tough one. So I could see that one going in favor of the Gamecocks. I mean, there's a few others that in between there I feel like could go either way. Now the Tez thing, what they do with that, I think that's gonna that's a big deal. That might be 2 wins right there if he's not able. That might take away 2 wins right there if he's not able to play. But overall, I would say we are just getting to the point where we're hey, they got to play the games. I have no outcome. I have no control of the outcomes of the games. I just go out. But look, I just think we're getting to the point where we're really trying to evaluate, what can this team truly accomplish? What are the pieces they have in play? And so that's my overall thoughts.
Hey, you got to take the good with the bad, Jeremiah. It is hilarious. I had to throw that up and to be honest, I thought the same thing. I was like, God, he can't come on the prediction pod. He says 8 wins. He's going to get
Everybody's
Undefeated.
gonna be mad at it.
National champions. My bad.
they're going to go
Get us
nuts.
out of here.
They're gonna be like, get that guy off
Who's
the
this guy
stage.
making all these realistic points?
But yeah, I mean, to your point about realistic expectations, I mean, we've been told over and over, and I've thought over and over, North Carolina's 8-win football program. Now, we're going to have our prediction pod at some point. Somebody asked about the podcast schedule. I'm trying to get a Tez Walker decision before we do prediction pods and all that kind of stuff, because I do feel that he changes the game a little bit for North Carolina, gives them some freebies on offense, which they might not necessarily have. But I do think somebody said in the chat, this is a defining year for North Carolina. I believe that as well. And to the point of the South Carolina game, I think winning that game for the team, you remember how Mack acted in 2019 when they beat South Carolina? He was emotional, happy that they won. And then they, won whatever, they beat Miami there. It didn't really carry over game by game, but I think this South Carolina game for the fan base carries over a gigantic amount. I posted a tweet. Somebody had a Carolina prediction. I forget what pundit it was, and it was 10-2. And I said, would the fans take this? And it was half and half that they would not, or half of the people said they would not take 10 wins. Where are we, folks? It's an interesting take, but hey, you want to play on the big stage, you got to have big expectations, and North Carolina's got them this year, I think. And let me go through these questions. I'm rambling. I'm gonna just handle the hot takes. Charlie Parks, I'm not sure if that's a joke. Could we see Drake May run some Wildcat? I mean, he ran a ton last year. I mean, you want to call it
Wildcat, though.
You want to call it Wildcat or running for your life, same thing. If this offense, this is the question we talked about. MGM O-line is average, very alarming for the D. We don't know. I mean, that's the assumption. Is the O-line good, better than we expect, and the D-line's not? Whatever. Those are the spring practice and the fall camp questions. The hot take I've already hit. Drew Krebs, shout out. I think it's the first time you've been back all year, Drew, since last season or since the basketball season. Appreciate you coming in. How much worse is the offense without Tez Walker? Does offensive line still dictate success? Yes to the second part. To be determined to the first part. But like I said, I feel like Tez Walker gives them freebies. Go deep. and I'm
I just
throwing
feel
it
like
up.
he's a difference maker. They don't have a guy like that. Not many people have a guy like that. I mean, he's 6'3", and he just can run past people. And I think that Drake said it. We've quoted Drake. He takes the top off of defense. They'll still score enough points. I think they'll still find ways to get their yards and their points if Tez doesn't play. But I think he is he's a difference maker. I just think that he may be the difference between good and great.
Yep, you said it earlier too, and I agree. It's a game-changing type player. Josh Downs could get open in a phone booth with 3 of us packed in there, and he was making that catch. He wasn't doing much after the fact on a lot of those plays. Tez Walker catches a deep ball from Drake May. It's a touchdown. I mean, they're not catching him, and he gets loose on a wide receiver screen.
Yep.
And some guy makes a bad angle. They're not catching him. It's a free touchdown for the offense.
You saw him do it to Georgia. Isn't it the highlight on that little bubble screen? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, those were the 2 type plays. Bubble screen, he runs past everybody on Georgia. Washington, he gets deep over the top. Those are your 2 highlights that you can expect if he can play. We'll see what happens. We've answered that one. Hardy back for the opener. I think Mack said to Adam twice. There's a chance they can play in the opener. So what are you saying, Mack? Are they going to do? Oh, do they have an opportunity to play? Adam, there's a chance to play in the opener. Dr. Smith, I think he said to you.
Yeah, we got it. He was giving me the business. Well, I thought that him by saying there's a chance they could play in the opener, that also means there's a chance they couldn't play in the opener.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
so you're saying there's a chance,
right?
There is a chance. Are Biggers and Chapman still the starting safeties? It certainly looks that way.
Yep.
They might be the only safety standing out there. I guess Derek Allen's
maybe.
out there.
Yeah.
So anything left before I wrap this thing up in a bow? It's been fun. I never thought we'd make an hour. It's an hour and 2 minutes.
Quick point. I got a quick point just to go back to something you were saying about, I think you were saying they think they can be good. And I agree with you on that, Tommy. I think that if we're taking a step back and a larger view at this, I mean, not to be too dramatic, but I think this might be Mack Brown will be 72 years old at the end of this month. I think this might be, now watch him coach 10 more years. This could be his last best chance, if you know what I'm saying. I think that's something I need to try to write at some point. Is this Mack's last best chance? You got Drake May at quarterback. He's going to be in the NFL next year. The offensive line, which has plenty of questions, you got 3 6-year guys on the offensive line and a 7th-year guy on the offensive line. The offensive line is going to be different next year. Quarterback's going to be different next year. Cedric Gray's not going to be here next year. They have several grad transfers they've gotten in through the portal that are here, but it's a one-and-done thing for them. UNC's going to be hitting the reset button in some ways. Well, in a lot of ways, next football season. There's going to be a new starting quarterback. It's either going to be Connor Harrell or some dude they find in the portal. So I think that, yeah, that's my thought on it. I think that this is Mack's last best chance at a special year. I mean, you got Drake May. You got to maximize it, don't you? So, I mean, that was my point. Last best chance for Mack. I don't know if anybody agrees, but that's how I'm feeling right now on August the 15th.
I wonder what Mack thinks about that, Adam.
You'd probably tell me to shut up.
You might hear it. No, I think to your point, this season they are loaded up. It's one of those years I felt like they loaded up for 2010, 2009, 2010 especially, and then that, like I mentioned earlier, that fell apart. This year they've loaded up again. It's taken a while, but they've gotten loaded up. It's time for the talent that's been recruited to play and step up. It's time for all of that stuff to come together, and then you've got Drake May. I mean, folks can say North Carolina was a 6-win team last year, but the fact is they checked 9 in the win column, and a lot of those were because Drake May was special, and he's going to be out there again this year. So we'll see how it is. We'll see how it goes. Somebody mentioned the IC schedule. I'll just give you a heads up. Inside Carolina schedule on the beat live with the 3 of us plus John Bowman will be every Tuesday starting on, I guess, the 29th of August ahead of the South Carolina game. Of course, we'll have the day after pod with Jason, myself, and Buck every Sunday. Because every game's on a Saturday this year. So every Sunday. And we'll have the game plan on Thursday nights live. Taylor Vipolis will have a special show every Monday, so be sure to check out that. Don Callahan will be here tomorrow for the noon dish. We might have a little bit to talk about on football recruiting, just a little bit. And,
Yeah. Tune in for that one, everybody. Good God.
We might have
The
a little
noon
bit. And, we're doing backflips on the noon dish tomorrow. But that'll be every Wednesday. And then we'll have some special shows throughout the season. We'll see how it goes. Just a ton of content, ton of Inside Carolina content written and videos with Jalen and everybody putting those together. Jeremiah and Adam knocking out everything. Evan, the new intern, going to be knocking out stuff. Michelle and Ben running the wheels behind the scenes. It'll be awesome. And of course, Buck Sanders 3 times a week. The man writes a column 3 times a week, and it's not just like I'm putting out content. It's thoughtful, and
he's not mailing it in, that's for sure.
There is no, as the shirt says, there is no off season. There is no mailed in work at Inside Carolina either. So anyway, a lot of stuff to look forward to, but we're going to wrap this one up. Appreciate everybody. Shout out to the 200 plus that have been here the whole time. Shout out to the regulars. We'll be back tomorrow, Don and I, at noon tomorrow. It's Wednesday at noon for the noon dish. Jeremiah, Adam, and myself will be back at some point. Johnny T-shirt will always be here. Support them. Thanks, folks.